Well, as we introduced ourselves, let me introduce our next speaker to all of you, and start taking all your questions down early, because I know we're going to put you to the test here, Paul. So we had a good, I don't know if you were in the room earlier this morning, but we really had a lot of good conversation moving us into this idea of the citizen experience. I found that word, I think I'm going to take back. We say customer, but really we're talking about the citizen experience in the public sector. And you're going to talk to us about enhancing government IT services through community-centric strategies. Adopt a community-centric approach to strategic planning, considering demographic shifts. And I think this is very important as well, with all the big infrastructure projects that I know I've been part on and work on too. Community engagement and community involvement and buy-in is very, very important, not to mention in government service. So this is Paul Sherman from Ward 5 Councillor, City of Burlington, Region of Halton. Welcome to our forum.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. How many of you work in government? Okay, a bunch of you. Then I should start this conversation with perhaps telling you a little bit about myself so that I don't sound like I'm totally crazy. I have to tell you that this is my 5th career. I've been elected 4 times. I'm the City Councillor of Burlington and at the Region of Halton. And I'm also president of the Halton Community Housing Corporation. But I should tell you where I'm coming from, because most people think I'm certainly off the planet of government. I started off as an accountant, and I know that's something I have to own up to, like an AA kind of thing. My name is Paul. But I started off before that in engineering, and then decided that engineering was way too linear, and I wanted to do something more creative. And then I found accounting. That doesn't always do well with the accounting professionals. But after doing that, I worked with Levi Strauss, and then I worked for Nortel, and some of you may remember the name Nortel, Northern Telecom. In fact, in Ottawa, I was involved with with a lot of digital technology right then. In fact, we founded the digital packet switching business in Ottawa there, and I was controller of that division. After that, I had an opportunity. We were downsizing the corporation, and I had to take a bunch of people out of one of the departments I managed, so I put my name on the list, and they gave me a check, and I went, "This is good." But then there you are, some of you are employed, and you understand fully when you're not employed, you have to think differently. So I set up a consulting business, and subsequently got to travel the world, and I had consultants around the world, clients around the world. And then after about 17 years of that, I got bored and decided I want to do something different. And because I felt like I'd had 1 year's experience 17 times, I'd be reorganizing very large corporations. And so I decided I'd go and look for a real job. And I just happened that I landed in the role of CEO, president of an organization called the Institute of Management Accountants in the United States. And we had thousands of members around the world, which was fascinating because the closest I got to anything to do with government, because it's a not-for-profit organization, lots of people wanted to influence decisions. And then after 5 years of that, redesigned the whole thing, tripled the membership, made it into a significantly successful organization. Again, I got bored and I moved back to Canada. And of course, in 2008, when the credit markets melted, and that left me with a situation after a year and a half, looking out of my window, thinking, gosh, people live and work within proximity to each other. And one day, the mayor of the city calls me up, and I didn't know him, and he said, "Well, you should run for council." And I thought, wow. After a little while, I did, and this has been the most fulfilling role I have ever had. So for those of you in government, just recognize that the work we do is really important and valued, yet I would have to talk to you about governance, which I will do, and that will get you into the very topic we're here to talk about. So I told you that little story only so that you'd know where I'm coming from is based on a whole different frame of mind. To start off here. Okay, so the first slide gives you a picture of a gentleman by the name of Alfred Rappaport. Has anybody heard that name before? Okay, so Alfred Rappaport is important because he wrote a book in 1986 called Creating Shareholder Value. This is entirely about stock markets and things like that, and I have to remind you that I'm an accountant, so I speak funny. I have to tell you, prior to about 1985, stock market valuation of corporations was largely based on balance sheet value. And balance sheet valuation in that period and prior was largely based on what we call tangible assets. You understand what I mean by tangible assets? So buildings, machines, inventory, things like that, right? But after that, it became, as we got into the internet and we got into global business, the environment changed so that gradually businesses became valued on intellectual property, intangible assets. And if you take a look at balance sheets 30 years ago, 85% of company valuation was based on tangible assets. Today, 85% of company value is based on intangible assets. The reason then Alfred Rappaport is important is that his book was all about how you value corporations based on discounted future cash flow. So if you ever wonder when you're investing whether you're making a good investment or not, you have to understand it all comes down to confidence in humans. Am I making sense? And there's a parallel with government. Because up until now, our position has been, we make all the rules. We have bylaws, we have laws, we have regulations, we have policies, and gosh, we follow those finitely. Just yesterday, I was in a tariff meeting on a committee with our community leaders, and one of the fellows said, have you ever heard of the Fox 40 whistle? This is a red whistle owned by Ron Foxcroft. They've been shipping these things around the world for decades. Just 2 days ago, a ship full, a truck, container full, was stopped at the border going into the United States. And they told them they would have to pay a 25% tariff on those plastic whistles because it had a metal ring in the end of it. Rules. Government makes rules, and then we get people doing them, and really they're so out of touch with reality and human beings at times. Again, don't take me as being critical at this point. I'm just talking about how we think things through and apply things. The important thing is that the whole perspective of the community in our government environment, remember I'm an elected official, you know what qualifications you have to be elected? Anybody know? Right. Actually, I would go a step further. You have to not lose. Right? So as a collective, we're not necessarily qualified to make the choices we are asked to make. Does anybody disagree with that? Right? And that means that, that puts all of you who work for government into a difficult position because you end up having to play a defensive game. And you know that whatever the politicians are thinking doesn't necessarily relate to what the interests of the community are. And that comes to the second point. So I've talked about Alfred Rappaport having a future view based on confidence and then thinking about the future. And what you know as well as I do is that when it comes down to election time, what is the planning horizon that they're thinking about? How many years? 4 years. Why are they thinking 4 years? The next election. How representative that of the community's long-term interests is it? 0. And then you get to the whole logic of what it is I'm trying to talk about. And that is, we have to shift into a goal of thinking about planning for the good of the community for the long term versus just about getting reelected. But furthermore, they get people, I find politicians get really irritated with me. They go, well, Paul, you're making assumptions about the future. Oh, okay, I'm a planning guy. What do you expect? I'm a financial analyst. And you always make assumptions. Your budget is a forecast. It is not cast in concrete. It is not real. You're allowed variances. So don't tell me that we can't think about the future. Make long-term plans, short-term adjustments. The issue about the plan is not the plan itself, but the fact that we went through the planning process. Does that make sense? and then we can adjust and bob and weave as things change and materialize. So long-term plan, short-term adjustments. And then you back to my planning horizon and thinking a little bit about, okay, so what should it be? If it's not 4 years, what should it be? Okay, I'm going to put I've done a lot of strategy development for corporations, and my thought process is something called strategy formulation, which says, let's take a look down the road and let's work on the premise that the purpose of strategy formulation is to prioritize resource allocation. Does that make sense? Okay, so when you get into government, like municipal government, the kind of resourcing that we have to think about is maybe 25 years out there, because you have to all do all these things on roads. I mean, in the city of Burlington, little tiny city of Burlington, we have $6.5 billion worth of infrastructure. We have a $600 million gap because we weren't thinking about the future and financing. So now we're having to put up our property taxes 2% a year just to try to close that gap, because in the past we were thinking 4 years, kicking stuff down the road. They were not thinking about the community. Of course, anybody working in municipal government? Right? And so you're all very familiar with people whining about potholes. But that's just nothing in comparison to the serious things we have to deal with. In terms of infrastructure, flooding infrastructure in the last few years has been a disaster. And so central to our thinking then is how far down the road should we be thinking relative to the good of the community. And you can see on this little image, we've got the picture of, the hopeful politician standing on a wobbly boat because he doesn't know if he's going to be elected or re-elected, and he's thinking about only that. Whereas perhaps what he or she should be thinking about is the picture on the bottom. What is that going to look like? And I'm going to give you a little more evidence to think about on that matter. Fundamental to this is having trusting relationships, and that was the conversation you were just having. Right? By the way, I've just been building a program just to incorporate a not-for-profit corporation called Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, Canada. It's got American roots, so I would call it Canada. But our goal is to keep people out of hospitals and long-term care by keeping them well with preventative care model. Totally 100% proved. Our pilot project's already demonstrated. Central to that is trusting relationships and being caring about the human beings who we are working with, so that they get the support they need. And my argument to you should be our elected officials should be having the same thought process. But that means they need to be informed properly. And being informed properly as you come in as a new elected official is getting the briefings from the civil servants, and it's all about rules and bylaws, and this is the way we do it, and this is the way they don't, and we can't do that, and we can't do this, but we could do that. So get to the point on this is that we need to think differently, out of the box, but not randomly out of the box. We're going to be thinking about the people whose lives we take care of. So back in 2014, we were starting to, I was elected first time in 2010. The next election was 2014. And at that time, we were saying we need to do a strategic plan for the city of Burlington. Oh, okay. I cannot do a 4-year strategic plan because it's not strategic. It's got nothing to do with strategy. So I managed to persuade my colleagues to create something called Vision 2040 with a 25-year strategic planning horizon, built on the interests of the community. Does that seem like a thing to do? But what we did was we set targets for what we wanted. For example, we wanted to be net carbon neutral in the operations of the city of Burlington by 2040. But a lot of people were having a hard time with that. But how can we do that? I said, well, how about we think about it a bit and establish the steps that we have to take in order to get there? And we don't have to do it all today, but we certainly can think through, how we could step back from 2040 and what things we need to have accomplished each year, each 5 years, and certainly we can do in the next 5 years. Okay, so that's what we did, and you'll see there are names on there, and they're not in front of my eyes, but in terms of how we were going to grow, what we were going to do about the environment, and in terms of roads, infrastructure, and all the rest of all those things had to be accomplished. Back in 2015, we were built out. We have 50% of our land mass is rural. It's part of the Niagara Escarpment. It's gorgeous. The other half is urban. We were getting, after that point, about 1,000 additional population each year, which is very low, based on about 190,000. And then we are now in 2025, 10 years later, and now we're building a 2050 strategic plan. We have gone from annual growth of 1,000 persons per year to probably 3,000 or 4,000 people a year that we have to accomplish. But we have no greenfield land. We have no land. It's all infill. So from basically a situation in 2015 for Vision 2040, where we were thinking about, quality of life. How are we going to make it nice for all the folks who live in these old houses, big old houses, and they'll live forever, and we'll look after them forever. Of course, that's got nothing to do with where we are now, where we're thinking we'll have to have 320,000 instead of 195 by 2050. And because we have no land, anybody in planning? Planners? The Bible. We build based on what our thinking has been for the last 50 years or 30 years or 20 years, and then what that will do in the city of Burlington, because we got no land, only infill, it means we will be building storage units for humans. So I get to my point. This is not about following rules. It's about thinking about what we want for future generations of people living in Burlington. Does that make sense? The biggest issue is high quality of life. Period. I know there's safety, but that's part of the deal, right? You can't have a high quality life if you're not safe. So people are saying, but we've got to have a transit system. It's got to be transit-friendly development. Okay, well, let's talk about technology. Do we really need 40-seater buses running around empty most of the time? When we could have on-demand, autonomous small vehicles, right? You go down to Phoenix, you'll see them there. Go to Arizona, to Las Vegas. They're there. Keep in mind, there are other really fascinating things occurring today that were not happening 10 years ago. We will have 1.5 million more people, if we get it right, and that's frightening, living in Halton, Hamilton, and Niagara, which means we will double the population, which means that the roads, the infrastructure needs to be updated. We need a tunnel under the Hamilton Bay or the Burlington Bay. But we're not thinking about that because the people who hold the purse strings are thinking about 4 years out, right? So how can you influence this? How do we deal with overcrowding if we're not thinking about quality of life of our humans? How can we think about infrastructure and amenities if we don't actually choose to do so, thinking about 2050? Am I making sense? And then I have to tell you something which is bothering the heck out of me and a few others. We have the highest incidence of cancer in Canada right in Burlington. And that has to do with a highway, like a sewer, running through the middle of the city that produces the highest levels of pH 2.5, pH 2.5, pH 10. We have a quarry that produces masses. That's going to be expanded hugely. We're about to have CNN put an intermodal yard in Milton. That will produce those things. If you thought we had a problem now, if we thought we had a problem, it's going to get much worse. If you talk to our public health people, they go, no, we don't have a big problem there with cancer. We have no records of that. Nice. When do we start thinking about that as people who serve the community? Part of the vision idea, and you've got the notion here on the right-hand side with Vision 2040, is that, okay, so we have to have milestones from each of the primary goals that we wish to accomplish in the next 30 years or 25 years. But then to get us into the space, we have to be thinking about some period between now and the medium term that we actually can control. And so most people say, well, that's the next 4 years, and we'll deal with that every budget. But when you do that, your budget becomes a strategy decision-making device. And there's nothing strategic about a budget, because everybody's going, oh, it can't be more than 3% tax increase. Do you ever hear that? No more than inflation. Oh, my Lord. Okay. So then you get people saying, well, you should cut services, you should cut costs, fire people, do the Elon Musk on your business, right? That's going to go well. What we chose is 5 years, not 4 years. Know why 5? Because we wanted to go longer than 4. Force ourselves to think beyond the next election. But then we update it every year, but the first year becomes the budget. And what we found out, anybody ever heard the term kicking the can down the road? Right? Every year we'd be hearing people say, well, okay, we won't do it this year, we'll do it next year. Without understanding anything about what next year is going to look like, or the year after, or its implication for the long term. So what we've done is we've created a 5-year rolling forecast. We don't call it a budget. The first year of which becomes the budget. Anything we take out of that, we immediately update the forecast so that we can see the impact of the decisions we're just making, so that we are not making uninformed choices, right? So there's the 5-year plan. And by the way, I've got KPI on the bottom in the middle there. Who likes to be measured? Does anybody like to be measured? That's our biggest challenge, is getting measurement. We are driving that like crazy right now, putting KPI for everything. Our view of the world is we will have processes that are properly designed. We'll understand what the customer requirement is. We'll understand what our delivery is, performance is, and what the gap is in between. We will close those gaps. But it also means some folks having to get tied into it. How am I doing for time? Am I talking too much? Well, I will get through this quickly then. In any event, so from there we've gone to, from there, I'm shipping the page quickly. I just wanted to deal with some of the issues that we just raised. Anybody familiar with digital twinning? Okay, so it's an engineering perspective. And the notion here, and again, remember I'm a simulation modeling specialist, is that whatever we know about the current characteristics of our environment and our world, we can use that as a base level and start asking ourselves what might change in the next 30 years. So if you do just ask the question of ChatGPT, it will say, number one, demographic change. So we know, for example, we're going to have another 120,000 people in no more land. We know that we need more urban planning infrastructure to address the quality of life. We have environmental conditions, my comments about PM 2.5, economic factors are going to influence it, technology, oh my gosh. Transportation will not be the same very soon. And we need to think about it. We don't need places for buses to park in the same way. In fact, we may just simply need an automatic door at the bottom of the buildings there where the little electric vehicle comes in and folks get in and out, or they get the goods they're receiving, and that's it, or shipping. Social and cultural evolution. I'll come back to the population change in a moment. Governance, sustainability, global influences, health and welfare. So the notion of this is simply we're going to go from the extent, the equipment, the understanding of what we have of the human beings, and build simulation models. And they do actually, you can actually represent them on a computer screen like the hand on the left. And we can show those to you. I'm working with a couple of scientists. They happen to be associate professors at Mohawk University, but they actually come out of Arizona State University, and they are actual scientists. One of them is British, so we're okay with that. But good, very capable people. So what that will do is shape the decisions we make about going forward, because we will have evidence as to what we should be expecting. And our primary goal is to create a win-win-win, a win for the community, a win for the municipality, and a win for the people who are going to build all this stuff, and make sure that we get triple bottom line results: positive economic performance, positive social performance, and positive climate performance. Very simple things, high quality of life. Okay, so here's where I was talking about population. Have anybody not seen this Canadian population pyramid before? All right, so if you look at the one on the left at the top, it looks like a pyramid. You know, it's a Canadian population pyramid. It's kind of wider at the bottom and thin at the top, right? That was 1950. The one underneath it that looks like a half-eaten mango is 2024, right? And it's kind of mushy and messy. But the one on the right is 2100. And this looks kind of like a banana. In 2100, we will have 53,000 people is the projection. 53 million people. The math, because baby births is declining and the number of people over the age of 40 don't have babies, is that we will have, of those 53 million, between 30 and 35 immigrants who arrived after 2025. They are not the same as us. They are not the same people who are living in single-family homes who bought them 25 and 30 years ago, like me, where land was cheap, labor was cheap, and materials were cheap. That is not the future. We're going to be slamming people into everything they can in order to be able to afford it. Prices are going to change, the economy is going to change. So I leave that thought with you because that has huge impact on how you think about day-to-day decisions. So our model is simply, you know, I would call this a planning calendar, but because it's going to repeat itself every 50 years or every year. Basically, what we've done here is we said, okay, we've got a phase one, which is think about the strategy, think about the needs of the community for the long run. And that becomes our strategy formulation process. We'll update that every 5 years or so, maybe even 10. I think now the rate of change is becoming incrementally faster, so we'll do it every 5 years. Then after that, we get into taking a look at, you know, how our business operates, what the processes are, what we've got to do differently. And we'll be essentially getting into assigning, allocating resources, thinking about performance expectations, and then into the budgeting cycle, as I've shown you. So the forecasting cycle. Is this understandable? Okay. All geared to the needs of the community. Since I've only got a few minutes left, apparently 1 minute and 53 seconds, I was going to click on what we've been doing to make sure that we would get the voice of the community. So for example, we have this landing page for our community engagement, and it allows people to sign into every different project they want, and they give us their opinions. We then have groups of people who signed up where we will send random questions to, and we'll get them to tell us the answers. The reason I got into council actually and why the mayor called me was because I was on something called Shape Burlington, which was a mayor's advisory committee on what we were going to do different to get the community input. You can read the community engagement, community engagement charter on our website, and that is what we committed to in 2010, I beg your pardon. We have the same thing with respect to Get Involved Burlington, so different groups where you can land in there and take a look, drive around. I've given you the website address. We have built the first pipeline to permit dashboard in Canada, where we will tell you for every application we have what the status of it is, and we have 46,000 as of a few weeks ago, half of which are in pre-application. And the rest, I can go on and I can find out about every single application for development in the city. And it's dynamic, it's updated every day. So that's, on top of that, we've got our own AI system at the bottom of the page on our landing page. So you want to ask a question, you can. And I think they're about there. Oh, the last thing I wanted to show you was this one. We have now created an AI system that will read every application and give back the answer to the applicant within 24 hours. And we will tell you where you're compliant, where you are non-compliant. We will tell you what suggestions we could make for you to become compliant. What do you think?
That's impressive.
It's coming. It's there. It's so exciting. We're even getting help from the Ontario government because they're so happy with our digital twinning and our AI reading of applications. All of this means we have quicker service for people. I can go on for a bunch longer, but I'm going to spare you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, as I wait for, I think, the other rooms to come trickling over a little bit, someone will help us guide, and maybe we can open the floor for any questions for Paul.
I'd be pleased to take any questions. Yes?
So I'm curious to understand your goalposts, right? Hi, this is Babin from Toronto Hydro. I'm curious to understand your goalposts, which you mentioned in 2040 and 2050. So when you're planning every 5 years, are you sticking to the same goalposts? Or are you revising your goalposts as well?
It's a 25-year planning horizon that's always moving. So because circumstances change. And so with a 25-year planning horizon, what we're suggesting is that we will update it, and that will help us then adjust our plans in order to make sure we're current and representing the needs of the community rather than something we think is important.
But the objectives will remain same, right? The quality
Correct.
of life, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that will always be the priority.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
As we wait for the next question, I had one for you around, so we talk about, so I left Metrolinx as Chief Planning Officer, so I'm very aware of the long-term planning and the vision, but what we always get hooked on a little bit is how do we actually deliver for the citizen in this instance today? Because while we are looking out for the long term, they're like, but what have you done for me lately kind of a culture. So I'm just wondering if you could share with the audience here your thoughts around how do you plan for that long-term vision to get the influence on making the decisions that need to be made, spending money in the right places, but really keep the community and the citizen hooked and engaged for what's actually happening now. I think you start to talk about that engagement piece there.
Well, thank you so much for the question. And Metrolinx is a really great place to start. Because the problem we have that governments have not invested adequately in infrastructure in Ontario, maybe even Canada, for the last 30 years because they didn't think down the path. How is it possible that those Canadian pyramids, population pyramids, have never been taken into consideration before? Then we get a panic a year ago, oh, we've got to increase immigration to 1 million people a year. Absurd! Had they been thinking down the road and having clarity around what was good for the community in the long run, we would have been having that increase in the speed and capacity of Metrolinx rails. But in addition to that, they'd be thinking about infrastructure and roads. Today we have chaos because there's a new road needed. But if we don't build the new highway, and we have another 3 million people arrive in the region, what are we going to do about it? We're not thinking holistically in an integrated fashion, which is relative to the question we had before. We don't have a forward view.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, all levels of government need to be vested in the integrated thinking of planning for the future and executing on the future. Very good. My last comment was, I don't know if there's anybody from the City of Toronto in the room, but that AI tool you have, actually, yes. I think that they could use some help on kind of running that together. So.
Well, we are actually quite concerned about our tax rate increases, and we're quite happy to provide some help to you for fees, apparently.
For fees.
But we'll be happy to help.
Yeah. All right. So if there's any more questions? Oh, we have a question right up front. Thank you.
The School of Industrial Design. I'm the director of the school. So I was very interested in your digital twin example. So we do a process called speculative design, and I wonder if you've come across that as a practice it sounds very similar to what you're doing.
Sounds very similar.
Yeah, so we use design-based tools to explore possibilities and potential futures, essentially beyond immediate commercial applications. So it involves like this cone of speculation where you're looking at the probable future, the possible, the preferable, and you go increasingly outward. I just wondered, how does your team engage in these types of activities around speculation around futures?
I think our starting point is not focused on particular solutions. It's thinking broadly about the needs of the community and all the variables, and then thinking about how those solutions would fit in there. But fundamentally, it's all about computers and playing what-if simulations.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Very
All
quiet.
right, thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Carla.